Hey there, Emma here, and in 2023 I hosted a painting challenge called Dogtober where we painted a different dog breed every day of the month. You may have seen some of the clips that I posted on Shorts at the time, just showing like a few little clips from each painting, but I've decided to go and pull out the real-time footage and share them this year so you can follow along if you'd like to. A couple of disclaimers/explainers. The point of the challenge for me was that I wanted to try and loosen up. I'm a realistic portrait artist, and so I gave myself a smaller size to work with as well as a time frame. I'm painting on roughly about A6 size paper, which is pretty small. In terms of measurements, that's like roughly 10.5 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters or 4.1 by 5.8 inches. And I also tried to set myself a time limit of about 15 minutes. I really wanted to challenge myself to loosen up, but you can approach this any way you like. Maybe you'll do it in a different medium or a certain color palette. The options are endless, totally up to you, but you're more than welcome to follow along, and these are kind of like mini tutorials. I do want to point out though that as this was unusual for me and a challenge to me, not all of them are that good. I really struggled in the beginning to start loosening up, and particularly struggled with the long-haired dogs. But you know, it's an adventure and you'll see me progress through the month and learn a lot. If you want to grab the outline sketches, I have put all 31 sketches into a document, a PDF that you can download from my website. I will link that in the description. You'll just need to pop your email address in, which will sign you up to my mailing list, but then you'll get the document with all 31 outline sketches, roughly about the same size that I'm painting. You're more than welcome to print them, trace them, size them up or down if you need to. I'll be working with my usual set of supplies and mixing colors as well, but I will talk you through the process as we go. Let's jump in. Day 7 of Dogtober. We are painting a borzoi. Let me do it for you. I love these dogs, they're so cute. So we are going to get some colors on our palette. Now I am going to be reusing a bunch of them, so I will talk you through how to mix them from scratch if you didn't watch yesterday's border collie one or any of the previous ones. But first I want to get up a bit of a light pink color. So I am just going to reuse a puddle that was orange, and I'm going to turn that into more of a pink color once I get this pet fur off my brush. And I've also got brown and a dark purple there that I will be reactivating and using. I'm mixing a bit of that brown into the pinky color just to deepen it a little bit. So the brown I make by creating an orange mixture and adding blue to it. Blue and orange are opposite on the color wheel and will neutralize each other to create a brown. But you may find that it turns a little bit green. Mine usually does. So you just need to add more red, which is opposite green on the color wheel, until we just keep canceling it out. Now I've just added more to that puddle there quickly to create more of that color. And the purple I like to use as a bit of a black color, and that is made by creating purple from blue and red, and then adding a little bit of yellow to dirty that up. If all this color mixing is feeling a bit foreign to you, go to my channel and you will find a color mixing video where we create a color wheel that will explain all of that in much more detail. But we are ready to move on with the painting now. So I'm going to do a wet on wet layer across this dog. So I'm going to be covering all of the sketch with water except for the little eye. Actually, I can't remember if I cover the tongue. We shall find out. I'm leaving the nose blank at this stage as well. I was trying to avoid doing wet on wet layers during this challenge because it was my aim to loosen up and do things a little bit more quickly and stop relying on techniques that I use for realistic portraits. But I really struggled with how to paint animals with long hair, and this was another one that got me by surprise. Okay, so yes, I am leaving the tongue. So exclude the tongue, the nose, the eye, and also that little circle on the collar. I might actually exclude the whole collar. I probably should have checked before I started yapping. Okay, we're excluding the collar as well. Perfect. Now I have in the top corner there a little metallic pan of watercolor. I'm actually going to use that for the tag on the collar. So if you don't have that, that's okay, but I just thought it would be a nice touch. If not, you can create a kind of a goldy orange mixture. Now that the majority of the dog is wet, besides the eye, the nose, the tongue, and the collar, I am going to lightly wash a bit of this brown color over. And I mean lightly. So this is a pretty pale colored dog, so I was not trying to go in too crazy, which makes sense then why we would do a wet on wet layer. It really lets you control the intensity of the color because you've already got water down and it's going to be suspended in that and diluted naturally. So I can't be too mad at myself for doing that. It was a good way to control the depth of the color, but still. I am going to use a bit of this pinky color and just gently pop that where you can see the inside of the ear. a little bit hard to see on this version right now while it is all wet and shiny. I'm popping a little bit under the collar as well, just as a bit of a shadow from that collar. I'm also going to pop a little bit around the mouth, just underneath the tongue there, a little bit of the gums, dipping into some brown now, and we can start to intensify a couple of spots where we want to create a bit of shadow in the fur. So I'm just popping that along the side of the face where the long fur is kind of hanging down. Popping that around the metal tag on the collar just to give that a bit of a shadow in the fur as well. Plopping a few little bits and bobs, a few little blobs just down in the body of the fur on the body, a little bit near the opening of the ear and the tip of the ear. On the bottom of the mouth, just popping that in on the chin. I do want to do some significant shading around the eye. I like to leave that till last because it will just let the water soak into the paper a little bit more and means it won't go crazy and just spread everywhere and make the eye look gigantic. Even though the fur layer is still wet, I am going to very carefully paint the tongue in, so just be careful not to touch it up against any of the wet on wet that you've been doing if you're worried about colour spilling everywhere. Just using that rosy colour we mixed up. With a more concentrated version of that colour, I'm also popping that along the gum line, so we can see some of the back teeth standing out a little bit more now in between that gum line and the tongue. I have dried that first layer off to lock that all in place so it doesn't travel anywhere. Sometimes when you let wet on wet layers air dry, the paint just goes in places you didn't really intend for it to go. And what I'm doing is just erasing some of the outline around the fur now because it is quite a pale animal. I've got that first layer there where I can see the border of it all, but I just want to get rid of the pencil line. All right, dipping back into our brown color now, and we can start to shade a few things a bit more dramatically. And turns out I didn't actually do any shading of the eye on that layer. I thought I did, but that's okay. We're going to have more control now that that's all dried off. So I'm looking for just a few little spots to pop some darker fur in. I'm just popping little long strokes in, almost like negatively painting the fur in. I'm not thinking, oh yes, I'm painting a stroke of fur. I'm thinking I'm painting some shadows underneath some wispy long fur. So deepened up the tip of the ear, got this long little bit of fur down the side of the face, which I've tried to define and create a shadow. Popped a little shadow under the chin, going back to that initial long fur on the side and just adding little bits and bobs to the side of that in a paler color. Just helps bridge the gap when you've got a really stark difference between two colors. Adding some fur to the start of the opening of the ear. More of these pale strokes around that fur on the side. Just giving it a bit of a shaggy look, but trying to be quick about it. I'm going to pop some furry strokes and shadows in around the collar and the tag as well, because I've actually got the collar partially hidden by some fur. So just light strokes, light brown, wispy down there. And now I've just popped that around the tag a bit dramatically, so we will blend that out, but that's created a nice little shadow in the fur now. Going over basically the same areas I dropped the colour in on wet and just adding some wispy strokes around them to further deepen them. But now we can work a little bit on the eye. So I really want to elongate this area, make it look quite receded back into the head and just shade it. So I'm just carefully taking some colour in front of the eye and creating like a bit of a divot for your eyelid and your brow, how it goes back into your head. I'm really good at explaining anatomy, if you haven't noticed. Think about like cutting a crease for makeup. We are doing that for the dog. And I'm also shading just a little bit of the top of the snout as well. Curving a couple little lines on top of the mouth, creating a bit of an opening there, almost like a little bit of smile line. Into the rosy colour now, and I'm going to deepen up the tongue in a little couple spots. So I've got a little bit down the tip of the tongue there, just where it's curling up on top of a tooth. I'm also adding some darker color to the top of that mouth just to give it a bit of a shadow from the top part of the mouth, you know, casting a shadow onto the tongue. And I've just very carefully, lightly taken a line down the center of the tongue. It doesn't look central to this sketch, but it is supposed to be down the center of the tongue. The dog is just turned to the side. A little bit of a more dramatic shadow on the left side of the tip of the tongue as well. Going around some of these teeth as well, just to make them stand out a bit more. Into some purpley color now, and we can really deepen up the gums. So carefully bringing those strokes down from the back of the mouth towards the front, and then we can really see those teeth pop now. Taking some of this watery purple color down the top of the open mouth as well, just defining the edge of that and making that stand out a bit more. I'm going to pop in the little nostril, the little comma shape nostril. Sometimes I've been doing these with a pre-made Mars black from my palette, but I'm going to use the dark purple this time. Grabbing a bit more primary red, and I'm just going to pop some purple in there to deepen it. And let's paint in the little collar. So I've got this pinky rosy color, which is why we pop the shadow under that area on the wet on wet layer. Painting inside the buckle and then continuing on the other side of that towards the back of the dog. And you can sketch the strokes upwards and negatively paint some of that pale fur like it's sticking out over the top of the collar. Into some brown now, adding a tiny bit of purple to make that darker. And we are going to paint the little eye in. So we want to paint this iris, paint the eyeball, have it looking forward, so sitting at the front of the sketch of the eye there. Rinsing off and dabbing off my brush, I've just got a lighter version of that color, and I've just started to deepen up around the eye as well. So a little crease in front of the eye, underneath it. I'm going to intensify that at the front as well, really curve that over the top. It's looking quite funny at the moment. It's looking like it's staring at us instead of forward, but we will get to that soon. Some more brown, and I'm just going to sketch a little bit more fur, and it's looking very bold at the top of the head. A little bit more rosy color on the inside of the ear. Some dark purple now, and I'm just going to pop the little buckle in on the collar. Very sketchy, very quick. And let's paint the snoot in now. So with a paler color than what we did the nostril, we can just take that all across the nose, and I'll leave the top a little bit lighter. So I've rinsed off, dabbed off, and now just filling that in with a bit of water just to make it look like that's catching some light there. And drying that all off. Dipping into some more brown. And I am just going to fill in that little inner corner so that it doesn't look like it's staring off to the side at us. And I'm just going to do some strokes of fur over the top of the eye, just really elongating that whole shape. And shading down at the back of it as well. Bringing that shadow forward and pointing it towards the snout. And that's looking a lot better now. Blending out some light brown across the whole snout. Just shading it all up a bit there. I'm even dabbing some purple in there as well. Very pale purple. This area is all damp, so it's just kind of flowing softly around. Dipping into my detail brush now, my 3/0. And I am going to jump into some white paint and pop a little highlight in across the top of the eye. So just dabbing a couple little dots along the top and the slightest little crescent at the bottom of that eye. So what I'm going to do is blend that out a little bit, I think. I normally do. I've popped a little highlight on the tip of the nose as well. Maybe I'm leaving it. I guess I am. But what I like to often do with eyes is a really stark highlight on the top. So a couple little blobs along the top and then a crescent at the bottom. And then I like to blend that one out a little bit. So then you've got this really soft highlight at the bottom and an intense one at the top. And it's my favorite way to do eyes, but we're working quite small here, so I haven't worried about it. I've got some watery brown on my brush now, and I'm just further defining the eye, popping in what looks like a little bit of an eyebrow, a little bit of color to the side on the right of the eye and also under it. And I don't know what I'm doing here, to be honest. I think I'm just trying to smooth out the color that I'd popped there originally and just define that a little bit more. I think I could have probably done with a whole wash of color over the whole dog to make it a little bit more intense. I know it's pale, but it is kind of like very, very pale. I've just added a little bit of light purple to the inner bottom of that buckled area just to give it a bit of a shadow in there. And now what I'm going to do is dip into my metallic gold paint to paint our little dog tag in. So I'm really drying off my brush there, and I've got very little moisture. That's just going to help me get a nice heavy pigment load because I want this to be very shiny like a gold coin. So I'm just dipping off the excess water before I paint that in. And just like all the other paints on my palette, that is one of my handmade paints, Midas. So very carefully going around the tag. I think it's just a nice touch. I don't often use metallic watercolor in my work, but this is the perfect occasion. So drying that off now, and we're going to see that looking nice and shiny. Final additions now, I'm going to pop a couple little whisker dots in along the snout using the purple colour. Dotting those in, just a couple rows. Popping a little bit of a wash of this colour over the top of the head as well, just to define that. As I mentioned, it was looking a little bit bald. And just a little bit on its back as well, under the collar and under the tag. And just a very pale little hook thing that is dangling from above it. And I think just those little additions of purple in the fur just give it a bit of a fun pop and define those edges. And just finishing off here with a little bit more definition around the eyes. So you can go in here with brown or purple. Drying that all off, and that is our borzoi. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you in the next one.